welcome back to Library Says. My name is Jamie, and today I am finally wrapping up all 12 books that I read in the month of February. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. This month, I am going to do my wrap-up instead of chronological or reading order. I'm going to start with my least favorite books that I read over the course of the month, the 2 stars, I don't think I had any 1 stars, and work my way up to my favorites, my 5 stars for the month. So we're going to start with the worst books I read this month. Both of these books were books that I read for contemporary-a-thon, which was a bit of a letdown. But fortunately, my favorite books of the month were also for contemporary-a-thon, so that worked out. The first book on this list is actually The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. If you want really intense thoughts in the moment as I'm reading of this book, definitely check out my vlog, which I will link up above. But why did I give this book 2 stars? This book is about a woman whose brother dies while deployed in combat, and she's a single mother to twins, and she finds out one of the twins is sick. It's very dramatic, and it is very sad, and I loved every minute of it until I didn't anymore. The main plot of this book is actually a romance. Her brother had a best friend in the army. Basically, his last wish was that the best friend would go take care of his sister if he died. And he does. So the best friend shows up, doesn't actually tell our main character who he is or that he knew her brother. They fall in love while she's dealing with all the tragedy that surrounds her. The reason I gave this book only 2 stars is because there is a last second, like I'm talking the last hour of a 14-hour audiobook or something like that, tragedy that was so senseless, so unrelated to all the trauma and all the tragedy and all the grief that's already present in this book. It happens at the very last second. It was horrifying. It made me sob hysterically, and not in a good way, not in a like it moved me sort of way, in a why did you do this, I feel like I've been shot sort of way. Not so much. It just didn't work for me, but I know a lot of people really love this book and love this author, so if that sounds like something you're into, go check that out. The next book that I read in February that is also a 2-star read was Keep This to Yourself by Tom Ryan. This is a YA thriller about a boy whose best friend was the 4th and final victim of a serial killer in his small town the summer before. And this summer, he finds a letter written by his best friend the day he died. And it makes him think that maybe there is more to the whole situation than anyone realizes. Because the serial killer was never caught, and everyone assumes it was just a drifter who came, he killed, and then he left. But what if that's not the case? It sounded so cool. Unfortunately, it really let me down. The premise was the best part of this one. I found it kind of slow, kind of boring. I never felt super engaged in the story or attached to any of the characters. And the biggest sin this book committed was that it was predictable. I was able to guess during the first chapter of this book the serial killer's identity and how it all went down. I figured it all out immediately, just hearing the plot of the book. And that's no good for a thriller, so I did give this one also 2 stars. All right, next up are my 3-star reads for the month. One of these is a novella. It's Get Inked by Helena Hunting. So this is a crossover between 2 of her series, the Winged Angels series and the Pucked series. I have not read Winged Angels, but I have read all of the Pucked books because I'm a big hockey fan and I like hockey romance novels, which the Pucked books, of course, are. This was fine. I gave it 3 stars because it's very short, it's very smutty, it doesn't have a lot of substance, but it was fairly enjoyable. The next book on this list might be a controversial opinion. I read Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This is a book that I got so hyped to me by people in my real life who I know who loved it, and I was a little nervous because of all of the hype, but I went in hoping for the best. Unfortunately for me, I had no drive to keep picking it up. I could put it down and walk away. I had to make myself pick it back up again and again. I never felt like I cared very much about the characters, and I also felt like this book suffered from comparisons to a lot of different things. It was so often compared to Lord of the Flies, and Lord of the Flies I didn't love, but I didn't love it because it was so grotesque and so horrific, and it just you know what I mean? Wilder Girls didn't do that for me. I stayed very surface level with how I felt while I was reading the book. I also started comparing it, and this is my own fault, this isn't the book's fault, but I started comparing it to other books I'd read, post-apocalyptic books with body horror, and sort of the weird horror sci-fi of like Jeff Vandermeer and stuff like that. That comparison wasn't the book's fault. That was completely my fault, but I did find it lacking when compared to some of these other books that I couldn't help but think about, and so I gave it 3 stars. The next 3-star read on my list is Gabriels Promised by Sylvain Renard. This is the 4th and I believe final book in the Gabriel's Inferno series, a series that is published twific. It doesn't have the healthiest relationship. It doesn't have the best representation of women, but I, for some weird reason, really enjoy them. I have no defense. And there's a movie coming out on Passionflix in May that I'm very excited about. The problem with this one specifically is that it's just okay. It's just okay. There's not a lot of plot. There is a sort of mystery element thrown in, and then it's never resolved. We have no idea what's going on. And the book just ended, and I was like, it's very fluffy. And the other books were very dramatic and very emotional, maybe overly so. But this book reeled it in too far and was sort of just like, oh, that was fine. And so it was definitely 3 stars. Next up is Dirty Sexy Saint by Erica Wilde and Carly Phillips. I read this book because I watched the movie. Again, speaking of passion flicks, I really loved the movie. It's super trashy, pretty low budget, it seems. I mean, it's passion flicks, so that is sort of the name of the game. But I really liked the characters. I really liked the chemistry. I really liked the romance. And so I thought, oh, maybe I could just try this book. And I did. An interesting thing with this is that it was so similar to the movie that whole chunks of dialogue were word for word. I had literally already read the book, having watched an hour-and-a-half movie. That sort of surprised me. Usually when books are adapted to movies, they have to take out things and they have to adapt things, and they didn't do that, except for leaving off an epilogue, which I thought was an interesting choice because I thought the epilogue was sort of fun, but it was definitely just a 3-star read. All right, then I have Light It Up by Kekla Magoon. I really enjoyed this. I read it for contemporary-a-thon. It is a book about a community left in the wake of the completely senseless shooting death of a 13-year-old by a police officer. I did really enjoy it, but it is told in 16 different perspectives, and something I didn't know when I started it, it's a spin-off of one of Kekla Magoon's earlier books. So I think maybe those things hurt my reading experience just a touch, just enough that I felt a little removed from the characters. I didn't feel quite as invested as maybe I wanted to, but I did think it was a powerful story, and I did like the characters a lot. I think my favorite thing about this book is that it focuses on going on. How do we carry on in the wake of such a horrific tragedy? And I really appreciated that, and I think it was really, really well done. So I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read Bunny by Mona Awad. I don't know what to say about this book. It was so weird. It was so weird. Okay, so this might be the weirdest book I've read in my entire life. I don't think that's overstating it. I'm incoherent. Going in, you think Bunny is basically a feminist secret history, kind of. A female MFA student at this snooty private liberal arts school, I think also in New England. This insular clique of pretty girls who were also MFA students. And then she kind of gets sucked into the clique and weird crap goes down. Half the time I think they're on drugs. Half the time I think they might be mentally ill. Half the time you think there maybe is actually sort of dark magic at work. It could be a combination of all 3. I don't have any idea, but it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I enjoyed telling all of my coworkers about it along the way. So I did give this one 4 stars. Then I read Baird to You by Sylvia Day. This is a reread. I've read this whole series multiple times, and as I'm getting older, I am seeing more problematic content with it, but at this point, I can't be unbiased. I can't be objective about it. So this is a sort of 50 Shades-esque smutty romance series, except that I think it's sort of a smartly written answer to 50 Shades about 2 characters who both have past trauma that they bring into their relationship with them, but it's handled really well. Not to say that the characters always handle their trauma well, but the author handles the whole situation well and gives it appropriate weight. I gave it 4 stars. Next up is The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. This is the conclusion to the Truly Devious trilogy. This is YA mystery. It is about a bunch of kids in this private school in the mountains. It's very remote, I think in Vermont. And our main character, Stevie, is very, very smart and very into true crime. She wants to be a detective. And the school, Ellingham, has a mysterious past. The founder of the school, his wife and daughter were kidnapped. All that was left was a ransom note from Truly Devious. His wife's body was found, his daughter's was not, and the crime was never solved. So Stevie's goal in this whole trilogy is to solve that murder. But along the way, there are more murders, and there's more mystery, and there's a little bit of romance, and there's a lot of intrigue, and these are so much fun. I did think the second book in the trilogy was the weak link. I was worried that this final book maybe wouldn't be able to wrap everything up neatly and in a satisfying and believable way, but it did, and I had a lot of fun reading this one. Way more than I expected, and I gave it an easy 4 stars. And now we have come to my favorite books of the month. I read both of these for contemporary-a-thon, and they were easily the highlight of the month. First up is Birthday by Meredith Russo. This is the story of Morgan, who is transgender, but isn't out and hasn't even really faced it herself. And the story of her relationship with her best friend. They share a birthday, And so the really interesting and fun part of this book is that it is told on a single day each year, on their birthday each year, and their changing dynamic and Morgan's changing feelings and perceptions of herself and her interactions with her best friend, with her father. I cried. It was wonderful. If you read one book that I read in the month of February after you finish my video, read Birthday by Meredith Russo. And the last book on my list is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I don't know why it took me so long to read this book. It's been out for 3 years, I think, and for some reason I kept putting it off, but I finally read it. I loved it. It represents fandom so well. Depression, anxiety, friendship, the dynamic between Eliza and her family I thought was really interesting. I thought the romance was fantastic, and the addition of her comic and the actual illustrations from her comic throughout this story are great. Highly recommend you pick up Eliza and Her Monsters because I also gave it 5 stars. And that's it. Those are all 12 books I read in February. I was really all over the map, but I had a great time. It was a good reading month. Hopefully this video inspired you to pick up a few of these books. If you do read any of them, I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.